So in South Carolina, 4% of registered voters voted in the Democratic primary, which is, I'm going to suggest, a minuscule percentage. And we're being told, oh, it's over. And you're like, wait a minute, how many people voted in a country of 340 million? Similar on the Republican side. And it plays out again and again, certainly in congressional races, where what percentage of Americans actually participate in these primaries?
When we looked at this in 2022, what we found was that 83% of congressional districts are so safe for either the Democratic or Republican primary or parties that the dominant party's primary was really the only election of consequence. And nationally, only about 8% of eligible voters cast ballots in those primaries. So what that means is you have 8% of Americans electing 83% of our Congress. It's no wonder why they don't represent us. And that leads to the biggest tragedy in our politics today, which is not that we, the people, are hopelessly divided on lots of different issues. It's that our Congress is, even when we can agree. And we see this on issue after issue, on immigration, for example, being the latest. The American people can find common ground. Why can't our leaders? Well, it's because they don't represent us right now. And that's why it's so important we focus on how we're electing our leaders, not just who we're electing.
Yeah, the greatest myth in American life is that our leaders have to make 51% of us happy to stay in office. And it's totally not true. The truth is they have to get approximately 5% of people to like them enough not to challenge them or primary them, and then they're golden. The numbers I continuously try and present to people are that you have a congressional approval rating of, let's call it 15 to 20%, and an incumbent reelect rate of 94%. And people just, their minds are blown by the disparity. And up to 90% of the seats are now safe seats, to your point. So you can't lose in the general. The only way you can lose is if you get primaried, which ends up making you incredibly beholden to the party bosses and the insiders. It's like, oh, like, don't challenge me in the primary and then I'll coast. And on the flip side, if you do something principled and courageous, like vote to impeach Donald Trump, as those 10 Republicans did, then 8 of them were out in the primaries. And so everyone saw that and were like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, that's about the only way I can lose my job in the system.
Right. And to your point, Andrew, the only 2 who survived came from states that do not have traditional party primaries. They've taken this next step of reform to say we should replace the party primaries with a nonpartisan all-candidate primary. So voters have a single ballot where they get to choose whoever they want in every election. That's the system that we're trying to drive for. 5 states have this right now for state or federal office. Our goal is to increase that number by 6 by 2026.
And the best way to make things work better, and Nick makes that argument very powerfully and cogently in this book. He's like, look, guys, there's a whole set of problems you could be mad about, but the primary problem is the primaries themselves. And you wrote this book because people haven't woken up to the fact that that's actually problem A number 1.
Some people who say the system is a problem might be focused on money in politics or gerrymandering. Sure. I wrote this book because I fundamentally believe that the biggest solvable problem is our system of party primaries. And only about 2% of Americans would agree with that right now. So I'm on this mission to make sure more people believe, like I do, and we do here, that our system of party primaries, which were not handed down to us by our founders, they were an invention of about a century ago, are the single most important thing. Not the only thing, but the single most important thing we should be focused on fixing right now if we want a more functional politics.
A lot of people listen to folks like you and me, Nick, and they're like, oh, can this be done? Like, right. Is this possible? You say, hey, let's get rid of the primaries, and people think, like, aren't they carved into a stone tablet? And you're like, well, actually, not so much. So in November of this year, there are 4+ states that actually are going to consider whether to get rid of their primaries. And if a number of them make that move, then we could be looking at a different landscape as early as 26 or 28.
Yeah, it's an exciting time for the election reform movement right now. And you're right, the book is not just an academic exercise of problem diagnosis and solution. It is a prescription for a roadmap for how we can actually win. And the key to winning is the Constitution giving every state the ability to set the time, place, and manner of their elections, which means in half the states that have ballot initiatives, the citizens can directly, qualify measures to the ballot and vote on these election changes. In the other set of states, they can lobby their state lawmakers, and there are campaigns to do this. And there are learnings from campaigns that have been run and won. So in the book, I talk about how California moved to a top two system. It was both a legislative effort in a very courageous state senator, Abel Maldonado, who said to the Democratic Party, he was Republican, if you want my vote on the state budget, you're going to have to put top two on the ballot. They did. They put it on the June ballot thinking it would fail, but surprise, a majority of voters supported it. California succeeded. There's a lesson in that for the ways that incumbent leaders, courageous ones, can actually use their political capital to advance these ideas. I talk about Maine, a state where it was the latest state actually to open its primaries to independent voters, voting for the first time this year. And of course, in states like Alaska, where citizens like Scott Kendall there led an initiative to do something bold and for the first time with a top four primary. And what did we learn about how to craft an initiative that had multiple components to it, including campaign finance reform that was more salient to voters? So the art of and science of being able to win on these policy issues is one that this movement has already learned some valuable lessons and can even replicate some good best practices from other movements that have won. I have a whole chapter sort of just on the marriage equality movement, for example, and what we can learn about having a diversified state strategy. So the book does get into brass tacks of how we win, because winning is what enables us to make policy change, which enables impact and builds momentum towards us being able to do this on a larger scale long term.
We all have a chance to make meaningful change in the system. It's very real in a way that must be very exciting to you, because for years you've been making a case in the abstract, then all of a sudden you can point to real states and real races.
As you said, I think it's an opportunity for all of us who care about this moment that democracy's in, because when people ask, well, what's the biggest barrier to achieving this? One natural response might be, oh, it's the party in power that might oppose us. I believe it's the learned helplessness of voters right now who don't believe there's anything we can do about the state of our democracy today.
They throw their hands up and be like, what are you going to do?
Exactly.
Money, crooks, etc.
So my hope is that we just reconnect with our own sense of agency, that we can fix these things. We have fixed these things, and we can continue to do so.
Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Please do hit like and subscribe, and hit that bell if you want to be notified every time a new episode drops. Thank you.